Hello, I'm Dave Speakman. This week we've got Darren Glover, a really good friend of mine on the channel.
Hello.
Darren has his own YouTube channel, Darren Glover Bass Lessons.
I do, yes, Darren Glover Bass Lessons.
Darren has a particularly great sound on the bass guitar, and we're going to talk today about how Darren achieves that sound. And my experience of listening to Darren has been that the gear doesn't have all that much to do with it, actually. And I've heard Darren play through some very cheap equipment, and I've heard him play through his own equipment, which certainly wasn't cheap. And he sounds pretty similar, irrespective of what you put him through. I think there's a lot of myths surrounding this, probably from the manufacturers and the retailers who want you to spend all your hard-earned money on new pedals, new amplifiers, new guitars. And that stuff does make a difference, but it's perhaps, like the last 10% of things, would you say? Or...
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Fantastic.
It's a taste thing involved with that as well. Different amps do sound a little different, but what you're talking about, the actual tone and good sound and good playing of a musical instrument, really just comes from the fingers. The amplifier, it is a secondary thing. Even the bass is a secondary thing. There's guys playing on £100 basses. I mean, I've owned a few Squire type things myself in the past, and they've been great, and I couldn't tell the difference sometimes. But yeah, the sound and the tone thing, it really does come from, unfortunately, it comes from lots of practice and listening to music, studying musicians, learning how they get those sounds, watching what they do. It's research and practice, hard practice. Unfortunately for you guys who think there's an easy fix, you might be lucky enough, you might get some guys who just turn up and just play and it's like, whoa, wow, what an amazing tone. And you might come across students like that who surprise you sometimes. They've got this, they've not been playing for a long time, but there's something about what they're doing. There is a bit of that involved as well.
I think sometimes though you think, wow, this student's doing really well, and then all of a sudden their parents reveal to you that they're never off the guitar, and that's probably the reason why.
Possibly, yeah. But yeah,
it's the 10,000 hours, yeah? You've got to get your 10,000 hours in on whatever you're trying to do.
It is, yeah. I mean, I do have some simple approaches and fixes for just looking at tone. It's an incredibly important instrument, even though you're told it's not. Failed guitar players play bass, apparently.
Yeah, well... Yeah.
It might be true, actually, because I did play guitar until I was 13 years old.
Darren's terrifyingly good on the guitar, so he's definitely no failed guitarist.
Yeah, so, he's thinking like a bass player. I mean, I started to play bass as a 13-year-old, and it just looked like a 4-string big guitar to me at the time, so I would start to play bar chords on it, I used to try and do things like that, and I remember my dad saying, that's not how you play bass. You're supposed to play bass line. You're supposed to play the notes and just single notes. So I started some local youth bands and things. I played in a swing band, jazz orchestra, stuff like that. And I learned about bass through there. I got introduced to bass players. Then it went from there, really. So I learned about actually playing bass lines. I got into Stanley Clarke and Jaco Pastorius, and that completely changed the game then. But yeah, it's thinking like a bass player, thinking rhythmically, not being too twiddly and things like that. The stuff you can't get away with on the bass, I don't think. Or there are particular ways to get around certain things.
It's playing what's right for the music at the time, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's all about, that's what the important part is of the bass. The other thing I do like about the bass is that you get to play all the time. Yeah. So I always wanted to be an alto sax player, but I realised that you want to play a little bit.
He's quite good on that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have some techniques and approaches to the sound, what I make. I make a particular sound because that is what has evolved through my playing, of studying and researching players. I mean, that is the biggest thing I can advise, is to really listen and study different genres of music, study the history of music, study the instrument, what you're interested in, and study the other instruments as well, what they're playing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with hearing a guitar solo, either it's by Wes Montgomery or Joe Satriani or whoever you're listening to, and learn it on your instrument. I've learned loads of Charlie Parker stuff, John Coltrane stuff, Michael Petrucciani piano stuff, all kinds of stuff on the bass. I've learned about their approaches to sound, tone, phrasing, improvising. But yeah, the main thing for me was learning about the tone of getting a good tone on the bass.
Sure.
And that came as a shock to me because I thought it was absolutely amazing when I was 16 and 17. Or I was kind of like a big fish in a small pond is the phrase. I was around a lot of guys who were, I just knew I wanted to be a musician when I was older. The other guys didn't seem to have that sort of connection with music. So I really did practice and I felt like I was quite good compared to everybody else. And then one day, I had the misfortune of recording myself, or it was good fortune, I suppose. And I heard how I sounded. I mean, I was playing Teen Town and Jackal stuff at the time. I was like 15, 16. And I thought I was absolutely fantastic. And then I listened to it back and I was like, oh my God, that's awful. I mean, the phrasing was all over the place. The notes were not sounding great. And that just made me go back and really learn how to work on tone, and that evolved over the years from having a thin burpy tone to having a big P bass sort of tone to playing short notes, shorter than they should be, long notes, playing heavy, playing soft. I just concentrated then. I just thought, just concentrate on creating a nice tone with one note. And that's where I started with getting a tone together.
Great. Could we have a look at some?
Yeah, really simple stuff. It's just being aware of the different sounds and tones you can create just by using your right hand fingers and the way they interact with the string and the way you make contact with it. So if you were to play, say, a bass line, something simple. Some guys are going to pick out like that. I've seen lots of guys playing like this. Some guys will play the thumb. Some guys will play in the traditional rest stroke, and that's what I found. I found that when we play like this, we get a much thinner sound. But if I play with my finger as a rest stroke, so it lands on the next string up, and I bend that part of the finger a little bit, I get a much thicker thump.
It's worth mentioning that there's a really good video on this technique on your YouTube channel.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I've just recently posted it. Yeah.
YouTube channel and watch a lesson about this if it's something that interests you more.
Absolutely, yeah. So we got the different techniques there. We've also got the thumb technique, which gives you a thicker sound as well, kind of like the Paul McCartney thing. But yeah, we're just concentrating on one note and making a nice tone ring out. Taking each note, playing right up against the fret lines, which is essential for good tone. And then chromatic scales.
Great. Could you play that exercise again?
Yeah, I could, yeah.
Useful exercise.
So from the D there, I'm just going back chromatically. So it really is like this. But I put it into a position. And then going back again, keeping all the fingers really close to the strings and the fret lines. So I'm not lifting up and using all the muscles in my hand to push the note down. The muscle is really been built up in these parts of the fingers inside, and it makes you a little bit more nimble.
A little bit more.
Yeah. So that's my approach to just getting a nice tone. You're just practicing on a note and making it sound nice. Scales, whatever you need to do.
What's your thought about noise on the bass guitar? We had a little conversation about this earlier, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of different noises. You are going to get fret noises. You're going to hear me playing today, probably have me playing the introduction. There is added noise to the instrument, and it's metal on metal at the end of the day. It's not, even on a fretless bass, actually, you get noise, but on the bass like this or a guitar, the metal string is stopped by your finger pressing against the metal fret. You get these sounds. These sounds come up. There are sounds which you can avoid, such as inadequate hand muting in this hand. I don't know how many people think about this, but you need to be muting the strings what you're not using. So if you're playing on the G string up here, if you're playing with a pick, it's hard to mute these strings, and what happens is the bass only has to bang against your body or you'll catch the strings, and you've got that awful rumbling, thunderous sound underneath. So this hand, really important for your I've got either the thumb,
your little finger over there.
Little finger can be on the back there, or you can have your first fingers here with the little fingers. They're muting these strings which aren't in use, or you can use the floating thumb like that, which is the one which I most tend to use. And then in this hand we've got the muting technique in this hand as well. If I'm playing here, if you notice these fingers aren't down here, I'm always covering the strings in some way. You can't do that enough.
And it's the same when you play guitar. Very similar principles, really. Nice and close to the frets, muting the strings that aren't being played. if you don't do that,
Yeah,
it's a recipe for disaster, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if you're playing through. I mean, the bass guitar's probably the loudest thing when you're gigging. If you're doing a festival gig or something, you are the loudest thing there.
It is, yeah. I mean, you've got to have it sorted out. It's really important. And this is what makes the bass it's a great and difficult instrument. All instruments are difficult. People say, I'll learn the bass, it's only got 4 strings. It's actually harder because it's only got 4 strings. Depends what you're going to play on it.
There's always somebody who's studied it to
that
level.
But when we're just talking about the tone and just getting that clear tone, that nice tone, or the tone you want to achieve, it's not easy. I mean, you've got to really think about your finger placements. I mean, I've heard guys on recordings when we've hit the solo button and we're listening to this guy on bass in the recording, you can hear this. Loads of guys keep the beat here, and that's fair enough. You're playing the bass solo.
I've heard that a few times.
And you can hear this click. You think, what's that? It's interfering. What's the snare drum doing? It's not even the snare drum. It's the bass guitar. Or, these guys keeping their bit of rhythm going. They're hard habits to break, and it's not something you would generally want in a recording,
They certainly break me when I have to edit
that
out.
Chip chop all the way through. Yeah, I mean, and that is the sound. I mean, the gear is secondary. There are choices you can make with your gear to, I would say, enhance your tone or change your tone a little bit, such as like having the drive system on your amp and stuff like that. You might want a clean sound, overdriven sound, but I do think if you've worked on your own tone and getting your own sound, you still sound like you.
And the sound comes from the source, doesn't it? Originally, it originates from you, the person, and then it comes through this musical instrument. And the further away from you that we get, I think the less return we get for the investment. That doesn't mean that I've not spent thousands of pounds on preamps, which are quite a long way away from you. But it's minuscules of difference that we're talking about when we get that far away. And although it does make a difference if we've got someone like you playing the bass, it will make a difference. However, that's not really what's going to make the difference. It's practice, isn't it? It's practicing the instrument. It's getting better at the instrument that's going to make the difference.
Yeah, it's practice. And knowing what to practice and how to practice it. And some people can do that themselves. I mean, there's a whole wealth of YouTube stuff out there. I mean, you can't beat, having some type of one-to-one session. I mean, there's some amazing teachers out there. It's stuff you need to know what to practice and how to practice it. I mean, jamming and all that sort of stuff is brilliant. Working with people, doing like a jam session or getting with your friends in the garage or a studio, whatever you do, that's all great stuff, but there's no substitute for the actual hard legwork of practice and learning. The academic side of it all. Absolutely. I agree. And practicing stuff you don't know and pushing yourself into unknown territory and learning about that stuff, whether it be reading, whether it be tone, as we're talking about, scales, getting new stuff into your playing. It all takes a long time, and it just takes practice. But that's the enjoyment part of it when you actually get going with it. That's what is enjoyable.
You studied music similar to me. I went to university and did music. You studied at Leeds?
Leeds College of Music, back in the 90s.
Do you think that was a useful thing for you to do? I know there's a lot of talk these days, should people, you don't need to go to music college, you can just learn to do it.
It worked for me. Yeah. It worked for me. It gave me a confidence in my musical abilities as I got older. The academic side of music, I learned a lot more than I would have done without it. I was exposed to things which I don't think I would have been exposed to had I just got out there and played. But I do know that there were guys who got out there and played and they're absolutely phenomenal. There's a couple of guys, they never studied. I mean, they studied their instrument by themselves. They took lessons.
But they didn't study formally.
They did not go into a conservatoire or a music college. But it worked for me.
Yeah, I found it useful. I thought that it enabled me to work on my music. I did performance and composition when I was at university. It enabled me to work on it in a way that I wouldn't have done had I have just been doing it on my own. It structured the discipline that I needed.
Yeah.
And it also gave me a lot of contacts.
It does, yeah. There is that about it.
I know we never studied together, but we almost met through people who we had studied with.
Of course it is, yeah.
There's only maybe one other person between us that meant that we were introduced.
That's how it works. I mean,
I think we met on a gig, didn't we?
We did meet on a gig, yeah.
Where else
But
would
there's
you
this whole network of meeting people does come through college and gigs and stuff. But the one thing I will say about learning a musical instrument, or becoming a musician, it's not just something really you can decide to become a professional musician. Just to decide to do that, say at 30 years old and have a career change, but you can't play a musical instrument whatsoever. And what I'm trying to say is music is it's a lifelong learning experience from either being 16 years old or 5 years old or whatever.
It's a way of life,
It's,
isn't
yeah,
it?
it is, yeah.
Fantastic. I know that we said that the gear doesn't really matter, but should we just talk a little bit about what equipment you are using?
Yeah.
You're using a Fender jazz bass?
I've got a Fender Deluxe jazz bass, this one, so it's got the active passive circuitry in it. I use it a lot in passive mode, which is just like a standard Fender jazz bass, apart from I don't have the 2 tone pots per pickup. This has just got the volume, it's got the pickup blend, front pickup, middle pickup and back pickup. The tone control is here. And then when I switched into active mode, I've got a mid-frequency shift. Well, it's not a shift actually, it's just a volume pan for whatever mid-frequency the bass is set on. I can't remember what it is. We've got treble and bass there, that's in active mode, which sounds quite good in the active mode. But keeping the passive, it's a 2015, it's got the noiseless jazz bass pickups on it, and it's the only bass I'm using. I mean, I've had so many basses, and I've had quite a few at the same time, and I always come back to the jazz bass. It just works for me. I like the feel of it, I like the look of it, I like the sound of it. And amp-wise, at the minute I've got the Aguila AG500. Is it the AG500 tone hammer? I think that's what it's called. And I actually use TC electronic cabs with that, not the Aguila cabs. I have had the Aguila cabs, I've had lots of Aguila cabs, but at the minute I've just got it really simple. So I've got a 2x10 and a 1x12 underneath that. And if need be, I have a DI box, which is an EBS micro bass too.
And you're using round wound strings?
Round wound strings, yeah. I've always used round wounds. These are thinner tension to what, or thinner gauge, should I say, to what most people would use. Most people go for the 45s. I've got the 40s on here. I like this light feel of them, the bendiness of them, but they've still got enough round fatness to the tone. I do like flat wounds on a P bass kind of sound or anything like that, but I find these type of bass versatile enough that I can more or less achieve those tones. So if I wanted like kind of like the Jacko, the Jacko stuff, or if I want the James Jameson.
So you're actually muting now with
Yeah, I've got the power mute on there.
Yeah, let's see some more of that. That's really cool. And let's see some of your slapping. So let's just show that,
the slapping,
we're only using the same instrument, same amp, everything's the same. But listen to how the sound's going to change
I'm going
now, and it's just
blend the 2 pickups together now, so we've got the same on the both pickups. I'll just put the tone control up a bit, yeah. So we get the nice slap tone out of it. So it's a versatile instrument. It works great for most of the professional gigs, which I'm called upon to do.
I hope you found that as useful as I have. We've got new content coming every Friday. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers.